The city of Lincoln is home to almost 200 churches, from charming 10th century parishes to artistic Victorian chapels. The city is decorated with centuries of captivating history. However, Christian worship has suffered a sharp decline in recent years. Congregations are depleting fast, and churches are struggling to keep their doors open. In fact, Lincolnshire has been considered a danger zone for historic churches, with more buildings on the Heritage at Risk register than any other English county. So is the downfall of Christianity in Lincoln inevitable, or can there be hope of a revival? If the future of Christianity is to be secured, then it's young people that the church needs to appeal to. But with 7 in 10 young people being atheists, that's going to be pretty difficult. But there is one church in Lincoln enjoying some success. Alive Church sits in the heart of Lincoln and has become the city's shining light for a Christian revival. I spoke to Alive Church's location pastor, Dan Hargreaves, to learn about what it takes for a modern church to thrive.
A lot of what you're finding is some of the old traditional churches that are not moving with the times tend to be the ones closing. Lincolnshire, for instance, as you know, a lot of people are moving into cities, so there's a lot more heart. Lots of churches all throughout the UK that are based in cities that are progressive. That doesn't mean changing what they believe, but the style in what they do it. As you can probably see in the background, we're very multicultural. It's really good to evolve as a church. Now within that, not change your faith. So for me, the Word of God is your basis, that's your foundations. But the style in what we do it always needs to change, in my opinion.
And where reconciliation is tricky, where people are walking through.
Alive Church's willingness to modernise its services has seen it assemble hundreds of members, making it Lincoln's fastest growing place of worship and the core of Christianity in the city. It's safe to say that Alive Church is bucking the trend. My experience at Alive Church was enlightening. Despite not being a religious man myself, I still felt the warm sense of community there and, for the first time in my life, really resonated with a religious culture. I think it's clear to see why so many young people have found comfort there. For an outside perspective on this modern approach to worship, I travelled southwest of the city centre to Lincoln Evangelical Church, a place of worship pretty alien to the one I just experienced. I spoke to the pastor, Andrew Thompson, about the modern style of worship.
It wouldn't really be our approach, to be fair. I mean, I think there is a danger of churches wanting to sort of put on the best show in town sort of thing. And you can attract people in terms of providing what you might call feel-good worship. But I would sort of say that that's a bit of a red herring in terms of real commitment to a local church. And I think it is a bit of a problem in terms of city centre based churches and, you know, tapping into student populations. There is that temptation to give young people what they want.
Lincoln Evangelical Church advocate for a more traditional style of worship and believe that churches should ensure the key elements of services aren't forgotten.
Yeah, I always sort of say it was an old preacher from the end of the 19th century who used to say the prayer meeting is the engine room of the church. That sort of is where you find your core committed people, because prayer meetings aren't feel good, they're hard work really, and that's where some of the hardest work of churches is done, I think. So I would always sort of say to assess the health of a church, go to its prayer meeting. I mean, there are some churches that don't even have a midweek prayer meeting, which is frightening.
My next perspective took me down High Street to St Peter at Gouts, a church in a poor section of Lincoln with an older congregation. I spoke to the lay minister, Sue Frecklington, to learn about the style differences of struggling churches.
Youngsters like yourself probably prefer livelier music, A lot of them have bands rather than organs. I mean, our organ is a beautiful instrument. When it's played, it sounds wonderful. But trying to find somebody who can play it, that's one of our problems at the moment.
Churches like St Peter at Gouts, in the outskirts of the city, find it much harder to tap into the student population, and the older members tend not to take so well to the modern style of worship.
I think the other thing is that when you've got a congregation like ours, which is more elderly, they are more stuck in their ways, and trying to make them sing or do something that they don't really know, is often difficult.
It would appear that attracting students is a tricky task for churches to master. So to learn more about how young people can engage with worship, I travelled to St Hugh's Church and spoke to Helen Townsend, the University of Lincoln student chaplain.
In my case, as a student chaplain, particularly every Sunday, I'm looking for students who are coming for the first time, students who are just wandering in the door, just want to sit at the back, and just to say hello, because often what people are looking for, as well as something spiritual in life, is community.
Due to its central location and its focus on young people, St Hugh's has enjoyed some success. And by providing students with a source of community during their studies, St Hugh's will make students more comfortable worshipping in future.
We have a really thriving group of students, a huge group come to Mass. Afterwards we all go for tea and coffee in the hall, we have a chat, we go for walks, they go down the Spoons for lunch together, and it's very much a social group as well as a spiritual group of people worshipping together.
So yes, the situation isn't great on paper for Lincoln's churches, but there are a select few enjoying a quiet revival, and student appeal is key to this success. Despite this, it could be argued that focusing on students lacks long-term security for Lincoln's churches. The student population is rotated on a 3-year basis, meaning that their attendance can rarely be guaranteed for years to come. This is how Andrew Thompson sees the situation.
So one of the key, I think, issues for a lot of evangelical churches is the word commitment, and young people don't tend to be very good at commitment. And a lot of these city centre churches, I think, quite often don't sort of expect commitment. They're happy with a sort of a moving population, if you like, who are around for a couple of years and then they get replaced by the next lot and the next lot. But I fear that quite a few of the people who are attracted to churches and worship like that don't hang around within the church. So I think there's a danger of focusing on feel-good worship rather than commitment and good solid Bible teaching. Yeah, that's sort of what we would tend to focus on.
So what's a church to do? It's fair to say that students are no long-term guarantee, but without their presence, churches may not even last long enough for that to be a problem. And remaining functional should always be a church's priority. For my final perspective, I visited St Peter in Eastgate to speak to its vicar, Robbie Strachan. Despite belonging to a traditional church in a wealthy area, Robbie believes that student churches are leading the Christian revival.
Yeah, it's really sad. I think it's really sad. Like the stats you've probably seen in Lincolnshire are awful. I think there are something like 600 churches in the Diocese of Lincoln. That's just Church of England churches, and 80 clergy who are employed to look after those churches. And the average church has got not very many people going at all. And the worst thing is no young people and no teenagers and stuff. So it's all just dying off. So yeah, it's really sad. Without any kind of change, then the church in Lincolnshire feels like it's going to die. But that's not the case across the board. There are some churches, particularly churches in cities and stuff, that are growing and that do have young people. And yeah, so there's hope. I've still got hope, and as a Christian I've got hope that the church isn't ever going to be extinct. But yeah, there's some serious issues. The church has some serious issues in reaching out and connecting with people, and young people especially.
My conversations have shown me that if there is to be a Christian revival in Lincoln, churches may have to submit to a more progressive worshipping style. Yes, it's important that churches maintain the traditional aspects of worship, but without an open mind to what young people enjoy most, congregation sizes will only continue to plummet.